What is up guys, welcome back to another PS5 jailbreak tutorial. So in this one, we're going to be checking out another method of jailbreaking your PS5 up to firmware 7.61 using a save game file. So this is known as the Lua method because we can use modified Lua script in a save file to trigger the jailbreak, which is quite a bit different to the Blu-ray drive method that we've covered before. There's currently 3 ways that you can jailbreak your PS5 right now. You can either use the web browser up to 5.50, and then up to 7.61, you can either use the Blu-ray method or this Lua save game method. So first of all, if we head over to our settings here and we scroll down to System, System Software and Console Information, in here we can see our system software version. So I'm on version at 7.61. So after the first dash, you've got your firmware version 07.61. So you can follow this video on any firmware from 03.00 all the way up to 07.61. That is the highest firmware that's currently jailbreakable at the time of recording this video. Now, if you're on any firmware lower than 06.00, I would actually recommend not following this and going with the web browser method, which I've already made a video on. That's a much more convenient way of setting up the jailbreak, but it only works up to firmware 5.50. So if you're on 6.0 to 7.61, you will not be able to use the web browser method. And in that case, you have to choose between either the Blu-ray method, which we also covered on the channel before, or this Lua save game method. Now, the advantage of this method is that once you have it set up, it's much faster at getting up and running with the jailbreak when you load it. But actually getting it set up in the first place can be a little bit more challenging than the Blu-ray method. So with the Blu-ray method, you have to have, a disc edition console, as well as a blank Blu-ray disc and a Blu-ray burner. For this method, the requirements are also quite steep. You're going to need, in most cases, like 99% of the time, you're going to also require a disc edition console, a console with a working disc drive, because you need to get your hands on a physical copy of one of the games that is compatible for loading the save file. And it's these kind of obscure Japanese, weeb games that are only available in the Japanese market. Now, hopefully, as time goes on, we might get new games added to the list. Maybe some games that are available in other markets or most markets that we'll be able to use in the future. But obviously, this video is for the here and now and not what might come out sometime later. So for now, you need to get your hands on one of the games from this specific list. So any one of these titles will be compatible. Now, you can sometimes buy them on eBay from international sellers, or you can buy them from places like Play Asia or CD Japan, which will ship them from Japan internationally, and you can get your hands on the games that way. So in my case, I managed to get a physical copy of Hamadashi Creative, which is one of the first games that was supported. So that's the game I'm going to be using here, but the process is the same no matter which game you have, as long as you have one of these compatible games here. So that is what you need to get your hands on. The second part is actually getting the modified save file on your consoles to be able to load it from the game. And that can also be quite tricky. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. The way we're going to be doing it is that we're going to be restoring a backup file that we can restore onto the console that already has the save files included. That is going to be by far the easiest way and should work for everybody. There are other ways of getting the save file on there without restoring a backup, but those methods do not apply to most people. But if you go onto the actual GitHub repo, you can see the other methods available for getting the save file on there. So anyway, that is the general TLDR. So let's go ahead and get straight into this here. So first thing to do is set up the console by heading back here to System Software and System Software Update and Settings. Make sure you have download update files automatically and install update files automatically, both disabled. Make sure both of these options are unchecked to prevent accidentally installing any future system software updates and updating the firmware to a higher version that would patch the jailbreak. Beyond that, we also want to head to our network settings. If you're planning on connecting the PS5 to the internet, make sure you head into the settings, set up an internet connection, press the options button on the registered network and go to advanced settings, and then scroll down to DNS settings, switch it from automatic to manual, and then set the primary DNS as 62.210.38.117, and then click OK. This DNS server address will block connections to Sony servers to prevent any system updates from being downloaded onto the console as an extra layer of protection, which I would recommend. Again, if this DNS address ever changes in the future, I'll leave an updated one down in the video description that you can use. But for now, this is the DNS to use to block system updates. So we'll click Done and then click OK. and that should get us connected up to our network here. Okay, so we get this can't connect to the internet, but that's fine. It is actually connected to the internet, of course, and we are all good to go. It's just blocking the servers with the DNS. So the first thing I would recommend here is to back up your own PS5 first of all, just in case you have any save files or anything like that on your system, because when we restore the other backup, it will essentially wipe all of that stuff out. So make sure that you create your own backup first. So we're going to plug in a USB drive into your PS5. Make sure the USB drive is formatted in exFAT format so that the PS5 can recognize it, not FAT32 or NTFS. So on the PS5, we're going to head into our settings. We're going to go back to System, System Software, and then scroll down to Backup and Restore. And then in here, we're going to select the option to back up your PS5. And we'll just say yes to back it up. So primarily, you're going to want to back up your save data, screenshots and video clips and settings. So any games that you want to select, you can select here to back up. In my case, I'm not going to back up any games, just the save data, screenshots and settings. And then we can click next. I'll click OK to that message, and we will go ahead and back up our system to the USB drive. Okay, so once it's done, it'll say backup is complete. Your PS5 will restart. So we can go ahead and click OK to that message here. Let it reboot the PS5. Okay, so the console has now rebooted. So we can unplug that USB drive and plug it into our computer here. Okay, so on the computer, if we go into that USB drive, we have this PS5 folder, export, backup, and the backup file is in here. So all we need to do here is copy this out to our computer. What I'm going to do is right click and add this to a zip file. So I'll go ahead and send to compressed zip folder. And this will just turn it into a zip file. So just store it somewhere safe on the PC so that you can recover it in future. I'll call this PS5 761 backup. And because this is only a gigabyte, I'll just store it somewhere on my desktop just now. But just store it somewhere safe on your computer there. All right, so now that we have that backed up, we can go ahead and delete everything on the USB and get everything set up now for the save game exploit. Okay, so now we need to download a couple of things. We need to download the backup file to restore onto the console that contains the modified save files for the exploit. That'll be linked in the description, along with pkg-zone.com for downloading some homebrew applications to unlock the full functionality of our jailbroken PS5. So we're going to head to the HB store and download it for PS5. And we also want to head to the Items Flow Game Manager and also download that one for PS5 as well. Make sure it is the PS5 version, not the PS4 version that you're downloading there. So from here, what we're going to do is copy those homebrew applications to the root of the USB drive. Then we're also going to open up the Lua backup zip file here and take the PS5 folder and extract it to the root of the USB. Okay, and just as an example, I'm also going to put in some PS4 fake packages just to demonstrate installing some PS4 applications once we're jailbroken. And I've also got some PS5 games as well. PS4 games are installed as package files, kind of like APK files on Android, where you can sideload them to get them installed onto the console once we're jailbroken. And of course, with PS5 games and apps, they are installed differently using a homebrew application where you just have the extracted game files stored in a folder that are ready to launch on the PS5 itself. Turns out I forgot one when I was recording the video, so I just want to throw this in here too, that you should also head to this repo, which will be linked in the description, and also download this homebrew application as well, the homebrewloader.package, and copy that to the USB drive with the other homebrew applications. Okay, so with that, we can go ahead and eject our drive and plug it in to our PS5. Okay, so back on the PS5 again, back in System Software in the settings, we're going to go to Backup and Restore again, but this time we're going to select the option to restore your PS5 using the backup on the USB. We'll select the option here and restore, and we'll say yes, and we should be good. So this will restore the backup that has the modified save files available for all of the supported titles, and we can sign into the profile. And there we go, we should be all good here. So if we head over to our settings again, we can head down to storage and then go to console storage, save data, PS4 games, and you should be able to see all of the modified save files are in here for all of the different titles. So that means we are all good to go with a backup file. So now we can just put in our game. Okay, so we've got the game installed now. So all we need to do is play the game. And in most of these games, it should run the save file as soon as the game is loaded. but there is 1 or 2 games at the moment that will actually require you to load the save file. So it'll load the game normally, and then you'll have to go to the load option to load a save, select the save that's in there, and then it will load the exploit. But for most of these games, it should load it immediately as soon as the game is launched. So we're going to go ahead and launch the game here, and hopefully it will jailbreak our console. So there we go, starting UMTX exploit. And now it's running the kernel exploit, various attempts. Now it's succeeded in loading the kernel exploit. It's now running the elf loader to load the payload. And now it is loading etaHEN, which is the main jailbreak payload for the PS5 right now. And once all of these messages disappear, our console should be essentially jailbroken. So we're loading the etaHEN toolbox. We're not frozen, we're good. Okay, awesome. So now if we head over to our settings and we scroll down to our debug settings, you can see we have the etaHEN toolbox, which means our console is successfully jailbroken. There we go. That's the message I was waiting for. Not sure why it took so long to pop up there. etaHEN 2.1b has been successfully loaded. So obviously getting your hands on one of these games and installing the save file can be a bit of a pain in the ass, but once you actually have it set up, it's super convenient because you just run the game. You can see how quickly it loaded there, and then it closes the game automatically and you're up and running with the jailbreak in a few seconds. So definitely a pretty handy method once it's all set up properly. But anyway, now what we can do is go ahead and head into our debug settings here, go to the package installer, and we can install all of the package files that we put on the USB by selecting the install all option. So that will install the PS4 apps that I put on here, just as an example. Those ones will not be included in the description, obviously, just the Homebrew applications for obvious reasons. And then the Homebrew applications are now being installed. And there we go, they are all now successfully installed. So we've now successfully got our PS4 games and even some Homebrew applications installed on the system. So if you're connected to the internet, you can open up the Homebrew store. And this will allow you to download other Homebrew applications directly to the PS5 without having to download them on the computer and use the USB method. So if we go ahead and get this up and running here, we can select Store Apps and then install any Homebrew applications that we want. I would recommend installing PS5 Explorer here, which is basically a file explorer for the PS5 that gives you full access to the file system of the console. So definitely recommended here. Of course, if you're offline, you can just go ahead and download it on the computer like we did the other Homebrew apps and install them from a USB. But once we have that installed, we can press the options button to close out of the Homebrew store, and you can see the Homebrew application has been successfully installed. So we should be able to launch our PS4 games that we installed just directly from the homepage here, just like any other application on the PS5. So we've got Minecraft running as a PS4 application. So we'll go ahead and close out of that. And then also for our PS5 games, we need to launch that using the Items Flow Game Manager. So we'll run this Homebrew application. Just click OK to all of the messages that pop up when you first launch it. And then we can also launch our PS4 games from here as well. So Minecraft, we've got the option to launch it right here. And then also for PS5 games, we can head to PS5 app. And then we can select the option to scan for applications. And that will scan common locations like the hard drive, M.2 storage and our USB drive to see if there's any games on there. And you can see it found a bunch of them here. So we'll say yes to add them. And there we go, 7 games successfully added. And you can see they've been added right here. So we've got Stray, Plague's Tale Requiem, Biomutant, Devil May Cry 5 have all been added here. So let's try and launch one like Biomutant here. We can select launch. And that should start running it on the PS5. Give it a few seconds here to launch. And there it goes. You can see the game is now running. Okay, so you can see here we've got the game up and running on our PS5. And this is, in fact, the retail PS5 version of the game, not the PS4 version, as you can see here. It says transfer PS4 system save. So this is, in fact, the PS5 native version of the game here. And now we can go ahead and close it just like any other game. And it should now appear on the home page here that we can also launch it from here. Now, another important thing about the PS5 jailbreak is that it's a tethered jailbreak, which basically means when you reboot the PS5, you lose access to the jailbreak and you'll have to load it again. So if we go ahead and restart our console. So what you'll notice when you reboot is that nothing will work anymore that you've installed. So everything you've installed will still be here, as you can see. All of the applications are still installed, but I won't be able to run any of them because the jailbreak's no longer running. Cannot run my PS4 fake packages, cannot run my Homebrew applications right now. Nothing is launching. So what do we need to do? Well, we just run our Lua game again and let it run the jailbreak once more, which again only takes a few seconds. Oh, I also didn't mention I switched to my 4.03 PS5 if you're wondering. I just didn't want to restore the backup on my 7.61 system because I have a lot of stuff already set up on there. But yeah, as you can see, we in fact have the exploit up and running again. Just give it time for all of these messages to disappear. And just after a few seconds here, you can see we now have etaHEN running once more, which means I'll then be able to run my applications and they should load no problem. So it only takes a few seconds to get back up and running with the jailbreak after you have in fact rebooted the console. And then also for my PS5 games, I will not be able to run them directly still from the home page until I launch Items Flow. And then once we have Items Flow up and running again, we'll then be able to load our PS5 games. So now if I launch Biomutant from here, you'll see that this allows us to launch it again. So that is basically how you get back up and running with the jailbreak. Again, it really does only take a few seconds here with this particular version of the exploit. It's almost not worth using rest mode. Normally, I recommend using rest mode because if the jailbreak takes a long time, what you can do is just put the console into rest mode and then recover from rest mode instead of turning the console off and back on again. And by using rest mode, you can keep the jailbreak running when recovering from rest mode instead of having to run the jailbreak again. I will show you how to set that up here, just if you want to use that method instead, but it's almost not necessary given how quickly you can rerun the jailbreak with this particular method. But anyway, so if you do want to use rest mode so that you can keep the jailbreak running instead of rebooting the console, if you head back into your debug settings here, we can head down to the option for etaHEN toolbox on startup and turn this option off, which will disable this menu here when we recover from rest mode, which improves stability when recovering from rest mode so that it doesn't freeze when we try to recover from rest mode. And then what we can do is just put the system into rest mode as an example here. So whenever you go to turn off your console, you would just put it into rest mode instead of turning it off. So when we turn the console back on, it just comes out of rest mode like this, restarts all of the services. And so we don't need to run the jailbreak again because we have the jailbreak already running. We can go back into one of our fake package games here and you can see it's running no problem. So you can just put the system into rest mode instead of turning it off, but you do need to disable that etaHEN toolbox option to allow it to properly come out of rest mode without it freezing. The problem with that is when you go back into the debug settings after recovering from rest mode, you will just have the normal debug settings instead of the etaHEN toolbox options. If you want to get those options back after recovering from rest mode, you will need to hop back into Items Flow here. And when you're back in Items Flow, we can press the Options button and go to etaHEN Toolbox Options and re-inject/re-add the toolbox, which will bring the etaHEN Toolbox options back again. Now, these options are not necessary for running your fake packages or anything like that, but it's nice to have so you can always restore this if you want to. And then if we press circle twice to close out of Items Flow, we can then head back over here to the debug settings and we've now got our etaHEN toolbox back again. So that is basically how you can use rest mode instead of having to rerun the jailbreak, but it's almost not necessary given how quickly you can rerun the jailbreak from the Lua game. So anyway, that is the general setup here. Now, the last thing that I do think is important to show you is how you can update the payload that is loaded by the Lua exploit. Right now it's using etaHEN version 2.1b, but whenever new versions of etaHEN come out, you're going to want to know how to update to those newer versions that have additional features. So I am going to take a little bit of time here just to show you how to update the payload that this actually loads. So in order to update etaHEN when a new version becomes available, what you're going to want to do here, if we switch back over to our computer real quick, plug in our USB drive back into the computer. So if a new version of etaHEN comes out, I'll leave this linked in the description. This is the official repo from Lightning Mods. So if there's a new version available, you can just download the latest build here, the latest bin file, download that to your computer, and also download the Lua Loader project here, go to the code and download it as a zip file. This is the same project we're using in the backup that we restored. So with that, we can go ahead and open up the PS5 Lua Loader zip file that we downloaded from the project, open up the folder, go into the save data folder and take this PS5 Lua Loader folder and copy it to the root of your USB drive. So just copy it in there to the root of the USB. If we go into that folder here, there's an example payload in here, which is the FTP server, we can delete that and replace it with etaHEN.bin, and we'll copy that over there. Then we can basically copy the name of the etaHEN payload, open up the autoload.txt file here, and if we check this out right here, we can see that it's loading the FTP server file instead. What we're going to do is just replace that with etaHEN.bin and then save it. So that is what that will do. This autoload.txt file will now load etaHEN and the latest build that is available. And all you have to do is basically eject that USB, plug it back into the PS5, and now whenever you load the Lua game, it will actually prioritize the one on the USB drive and load that version instead, which will have your updated version of the etaHEN payload. So it will load the latest version instead of the older version that is on the save file. So that's one option, but if you don't want to have the USB drive connected every time you want to load an updated payload, you can actually also copy it to the hard drive. That's where a Homebrew application like PS5 Explorer comes in. If we open up this Homebrew application here with the USB drive connected, we can go to root access. And then if we press, I think it's left and right on the D-pad. Yeah, left and right. And if we switch between left and right USB, USB 0 should be the one that is your USB drive. From there, we can just hover over the PS5 Lua loader folder, press the triangle button and select the option to copy it. And then if we press circle twice to head back to the root directory, we can then go into the data folder on the internal storage here, and then just press the triangle button, and then we can select the option to paste it. And that will paste it in here in the data folder, our autoload.txt file, and our updated etaHEN payload. So by doing that, we will no longer need the USB drive connected. It will load this version from the data folder on the internal storage whenever we load our Lua game, instead of the one that is on the save file. And that's just much easier to update the payloads this way by copying them to the internal storage or a USB than it is trying to modify the save file to update the payload on there instead. So that is basically how you get things updated if you need to. Otherwise, you should be good to go with just the version that's already on the save file. So yeah, that is basically how you fully set up the jailbreak on the PS5 up to firmware 7.61 using the Lua method with a modified save file. Hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And once again, I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.